Hi everyone, my name is Loukas Pedone and I am a senior undergraduate kinesiology student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I am also a member of the Commonwealth Honors College and a research assistant at the Physical Activity and Health Lab. I have been conducting research and am writing my honors thesis on resistance training identification by wearable accelerometers. In this presentation, I will introduce our field of research, explain methods by which we carry out our research, and discuss preliminary results and conclusions. So why study wearable accelerometers as a means of identifying resistance training? Well, according to the physical activity guidelines for Americans, adults should perform muscle strengthening activity on at least 2 days per week. However, a majority of Americans are not meeting the minimum recommendation for muscle strengthening activity. Muscle strengthening activity is integral to muscular function with aging, movement, body posture, and balance, and is highly beneficial to cardiovascular health, overall health, and reducing the risk of death in adults. Physical activity tracking devices are fundamental to accuracy in public health measurements concerning physical activity, yet devices for muscle strengthening activity are not effective. Most Americans are not meeting the physical activity guidelines for muscle strengthening activity on at least 2 days per week, and a reason for this low estimate may be limitation in surveillance of muscle strengthening activity. Knowing the type, volume, and frequency of muscle strengthening activity would improve accuracy in activity tracking and provide more meaningful associations between muscle strengthening exercises and health-related outcomes. Wearable accelerometers have been used by researchers to measure physical activity. However, they are limited in their inability to detect non-steady state movements such as resistance training exercises. As a result, the advancement of tracking devices for muscle strengthening activity has fallen behind in comparison to tracking devices for aerobic activity. A handful of studies have explored resistance training identification and repetition counting by wearable accelerometers and have achieved quite high accuracies despite differences in protocol. However, these studies are limited in that their settings were highly structured and tightly controlled. The overall goal of this line of research is to improve accelerometer-based algorithms for predicting specific types of resistance training exercises. The purpose of our study is to identify accelerometer data patterns during a variety of common resistance training exercises in young adults. Based on accelerometer tracings, we expect to be able to identify distinct patterns for all the resistance training exercises. Following this line of research will lead to the development of algorithms or data processing methods to identify resistance training activity from raw accelerometer data. Let's now explore methodologies we utilize to carry out this research. Upon recruitment, participants answer various screening questions to ensure they meet the requirements for our population of interest. This includes individuals ages 18 to 25 and with no pre-existing health conditions. Once participants have passed the screener questionnaire, they complete an informed consent form and a demographics form. At this point, we are ready to conduct anthropometrics, which consists of measuring height, weight, and leg length. Prior to commencement of anthropometrics, participants are instructed to remove their shoes. Height and leg length are measured in centimeters and are later converted to meters. Weight is measured in kilograms. Each measurement is taken twice, and if the two measurements are greater than 1 centimeter apart or greater than half a kilogram apart, then a third measurement is taken. Following anthropometrics, we place 5 Actigraph GT3X Plus accelerometers on participants. Accelerometer wear locations include the non-dominant wrist and arm, the dominant ankle and thigh, and the right hip. Lastly, we use a GoPro video recorder as our direct observation measure, which we later use for behavioral coding and exercise type and time synchronization with raw accelerometer data. The exercise session takes place in the Body Shop gym located in the kinesiology department. During the exercise session, participants perform 20 different resistance training exercises. The exercises are shown in the table on the right. These exercises were chosen because they are very commonly practiced and involve whole body, upper body, and lower body exercises. This also includes both multi and single joint exercises. Each exercise is performed for 2 sets of 10 repetitions, excluding the plank, which is performed for 2 sets of 30 seconds. Important to note here is that the exercise session is conducted in a free living setting. This means that form, intensity, and rest are dependent on the individual. This was purposely designed to provide variation in our results so that a program we developed to identify resistance training type and number of repetitions from raw accelerometer data may be effective despite real-world variations in these variables. Software is a critical component of our methodology in both preparing for data collection and analyzing data. Preceding a data collection session, we use ActiveLife software to initialize accelerometers. This entails programming a start time for accelerometers to start measuring, labeling accelerometers, and setting the data collection rate to 80 Hz or 80 frames of data per second. We also ensure the accelerometers measure data in the X, Y, and Z planes. Following a data collection session, we download data from the accelerometers using ActiveLife software and convert this to a CSV file, which we ultimately convert to a Microsoft Excel file. We also use Adobe Premiere Pro to stitch together GoPro video recordings, as the GoPro initially produces several fragmented video recordings. Once we have stitched together the video files, we import the stitched video to a software called the Observer XT by Noldis. We use the Observer for behavioral coding, which entails annotating the participant's type of activity and the time of the participant's activity. During behavioral coding, we slow the video down to as low as 1/25th of a second to ensure ultimate accuracy in denoting the start and stop times of each repetition. Essentially, behavioral coding is our criterion measure for exercise type and time. Lastly, we time synchronize behavioral coding with raw accelerometer data and create graphical representations of accelerometer vector magnitudes for the different exercises using Microsoft Excel. Let's now explore preliminary findings of our research. Thus far, we have recruited and conducted data collection with 14 participants. 9 participants were male and 5 participants were female. On average, participants were about 22 years of age, weighed around 74 kilograms, and were about 1.7 meters tall. The average BMI was about 25 kilograms per meter squared, and the average session duration was about 57 minutes. The following slide displays the vector magnitude of the various accelerometers during 10 repetitions of push-ups. Time in seconds is displayed on the x-axis, and vector magnitude in millig's, a unit of acceleration, is displayed on the y-axis. Note the gray vertical line at 10 seconds on each graph. This is representative of the end of the 10 push-ups. We have included an additional second of data following the end of the push-ups to display the vector magnitude returning to its baseline value. We have also included a gray vertical line at 9 seconds to display the graphical pattern for one repetition. The first repetition appears different from the rest, and this is because the participant was in position and ready, however they did not begin the first repetition right away. The top left graph presents the vector magnitude of the wrist accelerometer, the top right graph is the vector magnitude of the arm accelerometer, the bottom left is the vector magnitude of the hip accelerometer, the bottom middle is the vector magnitude of the thigh accelerometer, and the bottom right is the vector magnitude of the ankle accelerometer. Note the minimal changes in vector magnitude in the wrist and ankle accelerometers. This makes sense because in a push-up, the wrist and ankle do not move much. Also note the large changes in vector magnitude in the arm, hip, and thigh accelerometers. This also makes sense because the arm, hip, and thigh move quite a bit during push-ups. The main takeaway here is that these patterns are unique to the push-up movement, and with enough participant and repetition data, we may be able to design a data processing program that recognizes the push-up movement from a single accelerometer or a combination of accelerometers and takes into account variation of push-up performance. So what can we take from our research and these preliminary findings? We have just completed all data collection sessions, and behavioral coding and accelerometer data analysis are ongoing. Based on initial accelerometer tracings, we expect to be able to identify distinct patterns for all the resistance training exercises. Following this line of research will lead to the development of data processing methods to identify resistance training exercises and repetition counting from raw accelerometer data, improving our ability to objectively assess volume of resistance training for research and public health applications. I would like to acknowledge and thank the University of Massachusetts Amherst Department of Kinesiology, the Physical Activity and Health Lab, Professor John Serrard, Greg Petrucci, Samuel Stenzel, and David Gamache for their instrumental roles in advancing this research. Lastly, I would like to thank you all very much for listening to my presentation.